He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
All right, welcome everyone to The Alex Marlow Show. We've got a very cool episode ahead for you. I do a deep dive interview with Emma Jo Morris, who broke the laptop from Hell Scoop, and I ask her whether or not she feels vindicated by the fact that Donald Trump was able to resume the presidency or will be able to resume it in just a couple of months. And she gives a lot of deep background in reporting what I think is the biggest story of the decade, and maybe even longer than that. Unbelievable stuff. She's a great hang as well. We also get her take on the biggest story maybe of the day, which is the pro-Hamas rioting going on in Canada while Justin Trudeau parties at the Taylor Swift concert, because she was a former Montreal resident, so she's very well qualified to opine on that, plus many other topics. I promise you, you're going to like this one. I'm getting huge response to the show, so please keep sharing and reminding people of what we're doing, emailing me at aloha@alexmarlow.com. I've broken my pledge to dedicate time for feedback and comments today, but I will resume that tomorrow, most assuredly. I'm reading everything you're sending me, and it's all terrific. I had a monologue planned, a lot of great stuff going on in terms of the news. Jack Smith surrendering, ending the Florida prosecution against Trump, a huge triumph for the president-elect. The anti-Trump resistant movement facing post-election disillusionment with their activism. Voters, a majority approving of Trump's handling of the transition, plus some new additions like my friend Dr. Sebastian Gorka. I'm going to save some of those takes for tomorrow's show because Emma and I went long. I don't want to make these things too long. But I will plug that if you were curious, I was on Dr. Gorka's show today. And when this airs, I'll have just been on Don Jr.'s Triggered podcast, which is on Rumble, which is a huge show on Rumble. So if you want more Marlow, then I'm over there, and I can't thank you enough. As always, I recommend the Breitbart Fight Club for more content. And let's get into it. This is the interview with Emma Jo Morris. All right, so I really wanted to talk to Emma Jo Morris as soon as I started to have guests. She broke the laptop from Hell Scoops, was one of my favorite employees at Breitbart News and still a close friend. She also just had a baby, a new mom. That's very exciting. And apparently God wanted us to be connected today because the top story of Breitbart News, coincidentally, when I booked Emma, was about Canada, which is insane considering everything's been about American politics for the last several years. It feels like, at least several months. But she's a Canadian and now an American, but formerly a Canadian, and perfectly positioned to talk about Justin Trudeau allowing Montreal to descent into pro-Hamas chaos. But Emma, I want to start with just a reintroduction to anyone who isn't familiar with you or your work. You have the most unbelievable story that you are a import, and then you went on to break what I believe is the biggest story of the last 10 years, a laptop from hell. Could you give us it doesn't even have to be the short version. You can give us a medium version of the origin of Emma Jo.
Just came here to do the job Americans won't do, like publish Hunter Biden's laptop.
That's exactly right. So right.
But actually, yeah, thank you for having me on. First of all, I'm super honored. I've been religiously following this podcast since it began, and I'm just so honored to be on. But yeah, so before you hired me at Breitbart, I worked for you for 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And yeah, I think it's 3 years. Yeah, it's exactly 3 years. Anyway, before that, I worked at the Post, broke the laptop from hell story. I was deputy politics editor there. And before that, I was associate producer of Hannity for 4 years when I moved here from Montreal. And I've been a dual citizen the whole time, just to be clear.
So hold on, though, before we get past, because we're going to get past Handy, then I won't be able to go back. Do you understand the Dr. Oz thing? Because we're getting Dr. Oz now, and I think it's Hannity's fault, and I don't totally get it. I've met Sean a couple of times, I would say 4, and he's always been super nice, but I don't have any relationship with him that's meaningful. I'm not a regular on his programs, so I'm trying to understand the Dr. Oz thing.
I don't know that the Dr. Oz thing came from Hannity. I know that Hannity knows him and is probably friendly with him, but I also know that Melania is friendly with his wife.
Yes, those are the two. Those are the two names I always hear.
So I'm muddling
from the Dr. Oz universe.
It was Sean. I still have his back. You'll know this. You know, if I work for you, it's like we're family forever, and so I won't pin that on Sean. I also think it's a very questionable choice, but hey, I didn't win the presidency, so who am I to judge?
I'm just saying that a TV doctor running a Medicare and Medicaid, one of the wonkiest, most nerdy jobs in the whole cabinet. I mean, it feels like there's got to be something else they could have given him.
Okay, if you drop the word TV in his title, he's just doctor, so it all makes sense.
I just want him to wear the scrubs because now they got the figs. People who have any medical people in their life know this. They got the good-looking scrubs now. We've never had good-looking scrubs. They always just look like basically the pieces of paper that are draped over your body, but now the outfits you can wear look good. So I think he should get the scrubs going, get a fig steal, and he should have to show up to his bureaucratic job in scrubs, and then all will be forgiven. That's just my take.
Well, I feel like a lot of like media doctors will wear scrubs in their hits and like public appearances because it's like, no,
Yes.
I'm a doctor.
Yes.
Like in case you didn't know, I'm a doctor. So I'd like to see that too, and I feel like it would be on brand.
That's almost as good as the guy who sells the Dyson vacuums who wears a lab coat. So you're reminded he's a scientist. That is one of the greatest marketing things I've ever seen. They're great vacuums, fine, but it's like you don't need a lab coat. Or maybe we do. Maybe that's why I've bought at least 2 of them, and they're kind of expensive.
Right, visual. It's a visual. It creates legitimacy. It's great. Definitely more legit if you're wearing the scrubs. So yeah, I know. I mean, I hope for the best for Dr. Oz. I hope he's successful.
Me too.
I really do. I don't get it.
Okay, so you're working for Hannity, and then you move on to the Post, or do you have any good Hannity stories we should know about?
Honestly, no, it was a corporate job. It was a fun job. Sean was one of the, I mean, honestly, I've had great bosses. I can't say that, but Sean was a really great boss, very thoughtful, very involved with each of us, his producers, genuinely cared about us. He was like sending me, I got married like a year and a half after I stopped working at that show, and he sent a crazy generous wedding gift to my apartment. Like had his assistant call me randomly and make sure that he had my address. Like, just sweet, thoughtful guy. No quirky stories from that time that I can recall. It was just nice. Like he was just a nice guy, and it was a very professional team. The Post was crazy. I went on to the Post, decided I wanted to work in a print outlet or digital writing. They hired me with zero experience because I was like a conservative with a pulse in New York. I don't know if our listeners have spent a lot of time in New York, but you don't find a ton of conservatives who live here, let alone ones that work in media and journalism. So I was like 26 at the time when I applied for the job. It was way out of my depth. I did not have the experience required to do it. But unlike the other candidates that they had who might have had more experience than me, I actually knew their audience, and I knew how to frame stories in a way that would resonate with their audience, which was something that was unique to only me. So they were like, okay, screw it. We're throwing the paper in the hands of a 26-year-old.
And while you were there, you got approached in the most unbelievable way with the most unbelievable story. So walk us through, and all of this is detailed in Breaking Biden. So I've got the exclusive, I got the best version of the origins of a laptop from hell. But you guys should hear from Emma. So explain what you're doing when you get the call that would change the world.
Yeah, well, so it was Yom Kippur. I'm Jewish, so it's always a fast day. It's a really high holiday. It's a fast day. I'm not eating or drinking for 25 hours, and I get a call in the middle of it from Steve Bannon, who gets on the phone and says, "Hi, it's Steve Bannon." I didn't know him at the time. He got my number from his producer, who knew me, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Steve Bannon. I have a story that's going to change your life." And like, as you know, you've worked with Bannon, and like, he's like kind of flamboyant in his language. He's kind of intense.
Yes.
So I'm like, what? And he tells me he has Hunter Biden's computer. And I was like delirious at the time of the phone call because obviously I'm like starving and haven't had coffee yet. So I'm like, I have to like just talk to you tomorrow. I can't really process this right now. I mean, can you imagine? And by the way, I've been at the Post at this point for like 6 months.
Uh-huh.
And And
well, stories like this just come up every 6 months. It's just about time, and you just could have set your egg timer to it. It was just,
There's nothing like Steve Bannon telling you that he has Hunter Biden's computer for you to feel like you're about to get fired.
Did you feel like there was any chance that it was real? Did you feel like because unfortunately, my news nose / Spidey sense now, whenever, and I had 2 this weekend where people sent me stories that sounded amazing and they got me very excited, but I was pretty much sure they were bogus, and they were both bogus. And it just happens all the time. What was your reaction? When did you start thinking, oh, I got to get to work here? This is real serious.
Yeah, well, of course it freaked me out. I didn't think that it necessarily wasn't real. In fact, I feared that it was real.
Wow.
Obviously, Steve Bannon is a political operative, and he was saying that he was like working with Rudy on it, and Rudy
He's not
is
playing around.
Trump's guy. No, but I was worried that like he like had somebody like steal it or something and was like passing it off to me and telling me that no, he's just addicted to crack and like forgot it somewhere, and like now I have it. Like, the story, which was true in the end, but the first time you hear it, you're like scared. And so I thought that maybe it was true, but like it was obviously sketchy, and it worried me to be involved with it, which I guess was obviously probably the reaction of other people that had been pitched to, which afterwards it came out that they had spoken to other journalists about it. But I remember, like, I called the producer who I was friends with, who worked for Bannon, who had given him my number, and I was like, "Are you guys screwing with me? Because like this isn't like, okay, like, just tell me the truth, and I'll still consider it, but I need to know the truth." And I was getting kind of frustrated, feeling like I was being strung along on false pretenses. And he said to me, he was like, "Emma, you grew up in a nice neighborhood, and I grew up in like a shitty neighborhood, so you probably don't understand this, but I do. And it's that Hunter is addicted to crack, and this is what crack addicts do. They like forget things places." And he was like, "You just have to trust me. Like, Hunter's a crack addict, and this is all true. Like, this is actually how it went down. He's just unable to keep track of his stuff."
Well, he absolutely is a crack addict, but this goes too far. I don't want to skip ahead too far, but tell me, did you ever draw a conclusion why you think Hunter Biden did it? Why did he really leave this laptop? How could he have been so foolish? As you and I have discussed many times, he is not a dumb person. He's a bright person, and not bright relative for the Bidens. He's bright relative for normal people. And like, how could he make a mistake this bad?
And he's also a high functioning addict.
Yeah.
He's a mess, and he's in shambles, but in a way he's able to pull off amazing things being that way,
yes.
Obviously, as we saw in the laptop. Obviously, by the way, that wasn't what made me publish it, but it was what made me decide to pursue it a little further. It was like that kept me on the line. It was like, yeah, you know what, maybe I don't know crack addicts. But to your question, like we've talked about this before, and obviously I can't like what is it? It's worth nothing, this opinion, but it's just my opinion because you asked. Like, I think that he was trying to get caught. Obviously, he was a bag man for his father and for his entire family. His entire family was constantly riding him and jumping on him to support them all. And there was this tremendous pressure. And Hunter Biden alludes to this many times in many communications that you see on the laptop, where he's like, he's talking to his daughter. He's like, "Unlike Pop, I won't make you give me 50% of your income." There is this flavor of resentment in the way that he talks about his father and about other members of his family, but especially his father. Obviously, he loves him and he expresses that too. But you can love somebody and still have complicated feelings about the relationship. And I wonder if he kind of forgot it there on purpose. Obviously,
so here's the follow-up: subconscious or conscious?
Subconsciously. I don't think that he would that he would intentionally hurt his dad or his family or humiliate his father or whatever. I think he was just getting pissed and fed up.
Yeah, I have the same exact take, and I think a lot of it's because you and I have communicated about this, and I think you've convinced me of this more than anyone else. But I do think that's the right take. I think he subconsciously wanted to get caught. It's the only explanation, because I researched him. I can't say as deeply as you, Emma, but pretty dang close. And I concluded he's very smart, he's very high functioning, and very capable of not just doing basic stuff, of doing very complex deals where he's making millions of dollars and barely getting away with it overseas, internationally. That is not a dumb person. That's not the type of person who leaves a laptop at a repair shop and forgets about it. So it just feels like he was hoping maybe this would be a way to get caught. And he did get caught. And then what happened?
Well, yeah, and then what happened was I think obviously the most extreme censorship conspiracy in American history, the most obvious censorship conspiracy in American history, the biggest, I think, press scandal in American history. And that sounds like that sounds overstated, but I actually don't think it is.
Absolutely true. It's funny how people were saying that the covering up of Joe Biden's mental decline was the greatest scandal in history. Like, I just don't buy that at all. Like, we all knew he was deteriorating.
He just died like regular.
Yeah, it's like it was a constant topic of conversation that he was declining mentally. See, I wrote a book explaining how he's much smarter than people give him credit for, which I think was proven by how much better he did against Trump than Kamala Harris, who had everything working for her. And the fact that she's a BIPOC woman, the fact that she's a donor darling, the fact that she's young and vibrant, all of that. And then Joe Biden, the doddering old fart, kicked her butt relative to Trump. I mean, obviously, he was far more gifted than people have given him credit for. But even in the book, I said flat out, he's of declining mental capacity. Like, it's clear he's declining. We all know. How do you act like that was a bigger cover-up than the laptop from hell, where they accused you all of being Russian assets because you reported something 100% hard and fast?
And that was like the least of it. Like, the entire CIA was involved.
They all colluded. The deep state all colluded. To say that it was a big conspiracy coming from the Kremlin. It was a repair shop in Delaware that had the laptop.
Yeah, and the guy's hiding in Florida. Like, he still has not recovered, by the way. But yeah, no, I know that the Biden dementia cover-up is not even close. Plus, Olivia Nuzzi reported on it, while it was going on, or within 48 hours of him doing the debate. There wasn't a sustained effort there at all. I don't understand that. I don't understand that claim. I think that maybe it's an environment where we just forget huge stories 48 hours later because the news cycle switched. But
so you'll enjoy Mrs. Dr. Marlow's take on this, because I watched the first debate with her, and I was telling her this is a huge deal. This is going to change everything. And she said, "I don't know. He looks the same to me." That's how he always looks at me. So it turned out my take was the prevailing take, but you could be an intelligent person and watch that debate and think, yeah, that's just Joe. He just does it all the time.
Honestly, though, I think that you're both kind of right, because on the one hand, yes, he always was like that. But in 2020, he was able to get away with it because there was such limited access to him because of COVID. He was able to just write off hiding, which he did do, as a COVID precaution. This was the first campaign where he actually had to be out in public. And so obviously we all knew it, but now it was really on display for an audience with zero filters, zero editing, no post-production, and up against somebody who obviously has all of their mental faculties, Donald Trump.
Right. Yeah, clearly, who's arguably the sharpest he's ever been. At least that's how he's acting.
Yeah, and they really shot him in the face by muting the mics because Joe Biden trails off the end of it. That's what he's saying mid-sentence, and Trump has a tendency to jump in and interrupt, which allows him off the hook for having to complete the thought.
That is such a good take. I totally agree that the muting of the mic really helped Donald Trump. And I don't think they would have asked for that, but they were given that, and it worked out. So I want to ask you about, just as one journalist to another, when you have a huge scoop and the whole world's paying attention to what you're doing and you're getting attacked, is this invigorating? Is it scary? Is it both? Or are you just so busy writing the next story that you don't even know what to think, or you're just typing?
It was a kind of all of the above. So when the attack started, my first reaction was total panic. Then my boss at the time called me, the editor-in-chief of the New York Post called me, and she was like, "This is crazy." But she knew that obviously that the story had passed the editorial standards for the Post, which are high, obviously. So she wasn't concerned about the claims or the veracity of the claims about the reporting. So she knew that we were standing by the reporting and that it was fine. And that I was just being personally attacked. So she was just kind of like, well, looks like you're retiring with me. Like she was kind of like, this sucks and maybe you won't work anywhere else again, but we have your back, don't worry about it. And that was what allowed me to then, as you said, like just plug away. Like I had to get the next story out for the next day. Obviously, like this series is going, and we were going by the seat of our pants. It was like all live. It was like I was filing a story at, let's say, 3 p.m, and it was getting edited until 6 p.m, and then coming back, and we were doing, and then it was going up at 5 a.m. the next day. So we were working on like to the minute time limits. And so, like I freaked out. She kind of talked me off the ledge, and that like allowed me to just work through it, and working while the criticism was happening allowed me to ignore it then.
One of the biggest scoops I ever participated in, even though this is Andrew Breitbart's baby, but I got to play a big role in it, was the Wienergate reporting. Yes. And my big contribution was that I suggested, and I'm not saying Andrew would have come to it on his own, but I was the one who suggested we frame this as a hacking story and not as a congressman dick pic story. And that worked perfectly. And it's something that, really, I think gave me a lot of confidence. Yeah, exactly. Claim it as a cover-up type of hacking. Maybe he really did get hacked. Maybe there's some sort of serial hacker that's going to be going around posting dick pics from, the congressman's website. Maybe that's to come. And that really, really worked out well. And that story, lives in infamy and was one of Andrew's signature accomplishments. That Andrew worked like a chart. I mean, he was incredible. But I made that contribution. And it was very good. One thing that you guys did at the Post that I thought was truly brilliant, and I want to know if there's any debate behind the scenes on it, is you did not frame it as here's a trove of Hunter's wiener pics, and here's Hunter with whores, and here's Hunter with drugs. You guys framed it as here is evidence of international conspiracy to benefit the Bidens, with something called the big guy retaining money in some of these transactions that seem to be discussed. This is really a corruption issue. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about just give us a little behind the scenes, Emma.
Well, obviously we had the whole hard drive. So there was everything in there. There was, like the homemade porn and like him smoking crack and whatever. And I mean, but it was flashy, and like we could have like splashed it on the cover and sold 20 million Post papers, or we could have focused on the emails, which was obviously much more political and interesting from that angle. So, I remember when I got it, I called my boss, and I opened it up and called my boss, and I was like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, this is insane. Like, there's so much here. I mean, not only there's insight into his personal life, into his relationship with his father. Obviously, there's the porn and the crack, and that's, obviously I work at a tabloid. I'm not a nun. It's like there is content value there, and then there's obviously all of the deals and everything going on in the deals. And at that point, obviously, I just opened it, so I didn't know what I was finding vis-a-vis the big guy. I didn't even know that the big guy email existed. And my boss just said to me, my editor was like, okay, well, listen, like, I know that Hunter Biden is a consultant and that he's like sketchy. I also know that he's a drug addict and a degenerate and all of that. But she was like, I feel like I don't really care about Hunter Biden. She's like, I care about Joe Biden. She's like, find Joe Biden in all of this. And that conversation was what really framed the reporting and gave me a direction in the reporting. That's really good editing. I mean, that's a great, I care about Hunter as a character, but right. Hunter is ultimately only relevant due to his proximity to Joe. Well, exactly. And we actually ended up doing some reporting on Hunter the man, and Bannon called me up and called me like an effing idiot, and what are you doing, and you're getting sympathy for him, and he was like freaking out, and I whatever, we had many reasons for doing that, and aside from the fact that it's just interesting, and maybe that's the main reason, is that it's just interesting. It's like, I'm not, and I said this from day one, from the first contact with Bannon, like, I am personally conservative. That doesn't mean that I am employed by the Trump campaign. I'm not employed by the Trump campaign. I'm employed by the New York Post. Right. So my interest is just content and news, not making Trump win the election. And I've said this, I said this under oath to Congress, that if this would have been, I'm pretty sure I said this in Congress, but I say it hand to God right now, if this would have been Don Jr.'s laptop with the exact same information on it and data on it, I would have published it and run it the exact same way, just because it's interesting content, it's compelling news, and I mean, it's relevant. It's relevant to the extent that Joe Biden or, in an alternative scenario, Donald Trump is involved. So that was how the reporting ended up getting focused and honed. It was that editor just being like, find the candidate for president, obviously, in this trove. Now we're the big guy.
So I want you to reflect. I want to flash forward a little bit, and I want to do more on this as when you join me again. I don't want to take up the entire interview time on it, so I'm going to discipline myself to flash forward a little bit. And I will make this recommendation that everyone should go to Emma Jo's Twitter, which is at Emma Jo NYC, and you can see pinned to the top, she's got her testimony at a House hearing on censorship about this stuff, and it's unbelievable. So you guys have got to watch it. That was such a cool event to witness it live, and you're just going to enjoy it if you've not watched it. And if you have watched it, watch it again. But I want to flash forward to now, because it must have been you didn't report out the laptop from hell to take out Joe Biden. That wasn't the point. The point was to report the news and to do your job. But you had to think they cheated in the election by suppressing your story. And it was an act of misinformation. It was an act of election interference. And it was done by the deep state. It was done by the current administration putting pressure on Twitter. It was done by the Biden campaign by putting pressure on Twitter. It was done by the big tech apparatus. All these supervillains conspiring to censor you, a woman in her mid-20s, and a tabloid newspaper in New York from reporting what was actually going on in this country. And this massive conspiracy happened, and it worked. But did it work? Now that we're in 2024, Donald Trump has won the election, and he's back and better than ever. He seems to be seeing more clearly. He now doesn't have an amalgam of deep state saboteurs and establishment fools around him, plus a few MAGA people. He's getting only MAGA, America First people around him. And the left is completely in shambles. Is there any extra vindication for you that you feel like maybe there was cosmic justice in the end?
Yes, definitely. Well, I just, I don't consider it like personal vindication, but, and I try not to do this because it always sounds stupid. But I do feel like now it's starting to come into focus about God's plan in all of this, and God's plan in the censorship of the story, which did move the election. And there's tons of data to point to that. But yeah, I mean, I think that obviously it moved the election, but what it also did was appall somebody named Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And it appalled him so much so that he decided to buy one of the platforms to create a more equal public square. So it was consequential. The censorship was consequential and worked in that it threw the election to Joe Biden. But I think what the bigger consequence of it, and like the cosmic consequence of it, was that it put America, I think, on a different trajectory in terms of, because obviously, listen, newspapers and news outlets are obviously still important, and they always will be. But there is, I think, a digital public square now that isn't the way it used to be, where you go to the park and talk out loud, and that's how you share ideas. Like, no, we're not going to the park anymore. Like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and I guess Blue Sky are all now the public square, and that needs to have some freedom in it, or total freedom in it. And so this event, obviously, in the short term, it was evil and horrible, but I think in the long term there was a lot of goodness and virtue that came of it, which was restoring our public square and restoring a freedom of speech, or at least an area for it.
It's pretty amazing. If they hadn't censored your reporting, and if they hadn't censored the Babylon Bee for naming Richard Levine the Man of the Year, then the culture war might be in a totally different place. I'm trying to trace back the history of it since I've been politically cognizant. And you have to say Musk, not a perfect guy. I've got criticisms of him that are not for this show. But his full embrace of free speech and MAGA has been the biggest cultural event, I think, since Trump came down that escalator, which was probably the biggest cultural event since Andrew Breitbart stuck out on his journey to change the media and the entertainment industry. I mean, it really, there's a straight line, and you're tied to all of it. So it's kind of amazing, Emma.
It's like that meme with the tiny domino.
Yeah.
like the time.
Right.
And then at the end, the big domino is Elon Musk coming out and I think endorsing Trump, which was more consequential probably than him buying Twitter. Although buying Twitter allowed us all to have a venue
it's all part of it. It's all the same stuff.
Freedom of speech. But I think Musk endorsing him gave permission to serious business people and people who think that they're too serious and too highbrow to be a deplorable to actually come forward.
I just hope every left-wing person who was a part of all the madness, all the censorship, all the abandonment of the First Amendment, I just hope they could watch this interview or listen to this interview and see us having fun walking through this history, because it will give them a cold sweat, and they deserve it because they did this themselves. They could have managed this better. They had historic opportunities, and they blew it with all the attacks on Trump. They blew it by alienating Musk. They blew it by overdoing it on the censorship. They didn't have to do any of this stuff, and now we're in a position, not to say we won't blow it, but we're now in a position to really run up the score unlike anything I've ever seen.
Yeah, there's still time to get big-footed, and we have a way sometimes of figuring it out.
Yeah.
But no, it's true. They totally overreacted, and in doing so, they totally discredited themselves. I mean, who was the real winner aside from Trump? Obviously, next to Trump, who was the real winner? It was new media.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mainstream media did absolutely everything they could. All mainstream institutions and all legitimate institutions did everything they possibly could, and it ended up being platforms like Joe Rogan and the Theo Vaughn show that put this over the edge.
I'll tell you personally that I thought I was a little, I loved my Sirius XM show that I had for a long time. And after that, I was a little reluctant to join the podcasting space just because it seems overcrowded. The word podcasting is kind of cringe. But it does. I did feel like that. I think I was wrong. I think it's a growth space. I think that it's people are, as we move from the cord cutters to the cord nevers, people who never have had cable in their life, they're going to get their news and information from somewhere. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to start is just, it feels like new media has doubled, tripled, quadrupled its power just over the last 6 to 9 months, it feels like.
Oh, definitely. Well, definitely. Well, just, I think that what came out in this election was as much money as is poured into NBC and ABC and all of corporate media. They weren't able to move the needle. They were not able to move the needle. I mean, it wasn't close. It wasn't even close. They hadn't persuaded like almost half the country. Yeah. Like not even that. He won the popular vote. He won every single swing state. It's like their rage is like this impotent, like pathetic nothingness. It's just speaking. It's stupid.
So Emma, you're actually a cool person, and I don't know that you're not internet cool. You're like regular cool. And so what do we do to not blow it? Because we're cool now, and I don't want us to freak out that we've been wanting to be cool forever. And ever since Andrew Breitbart was plotting his empire in his basement, and he found Greg Gutfeld in the comment section at the Huffington Post, which is where Andrew invented Greg Gutfeld. I mean, Greg gets immense amounts of credit, but he's an Andrew Breitbart joint, I think as Spike Lee would say. He's an Andrew Breitbart joint. And like all this stuff, like that, this is now happening. It's all out there. We got the Trump dance in the end zone. We got the UFC fighters. We've got the showmanship that Trump and his family bring. All of that, we got Musk, of course. All this stuff, we're cool all of a sudden. How do we not mess it up?
Well, I think the way to not mess it up is to think about how it happened. And how it happened, I think, was over the last like 8 to 10 years, maybe more. But let's say 8 to 10 years. The left has been so cringe and ugly, but menacing. And so people were scared to call them cringe and ugly because they were scared of getting canceled. And obviously, the left had control over all the major institutions, and those institutions actually had real power. So if you're like the guy who made a meme and you're put on CNN, all of a sudden like your life is absolutely destroyed and you're never working again and nobody in your town will ever talk to you again. But I think what happened with this election, which made us cool, was it's kind of like goes off of what we were saying. I think the influence of these psychos has worn off. And it's become permissible now to say what we all know, which is that they're obnoxious and like ugly. Like, honestly, they're the most aesthetically displeasing group of people. For the most part, they're activists that you could imagine. Not only that, they're saying insane things that are stupid and crazy. And it's just, finally, we got permission, I think, again, like in part due to Elon Musk buying X and in part due to a critical mass of people finally coming forward and saying that we actually don't agree with all this stuff that we had been saying we believe just because there was maniacs putting a gun to our head about it, that has allowed people to be like saying how it is, which is these people were never cool. They were just threatening. And now their threats are empty. So we can finally all say that. And now, like, I mean, I don't know about your circles, but like in New York, like it was honestly cringe and embarrassing if somebody would say that they were voting for Kamala Harris. Like,
absolutely. No, this is my neighborhood. It wasn't a secret
Trump voter. It was a secret Kamala voter because Kamala Harris like just represented this like super cringe non-culture that nobody wanted to be a part of. It was like really sketchy. It was like, only gender surgeries are what that's the only issue we care about is gender surgeries.
Yeah, it's kind of an anti-culture. It's not really pro anything of value. It doesn't.
Oh, and that's the only reason why I bring up the aesthetics. By the way, you just said it perfectly. The anti-culture. It's like I bring up their aesthetics and the fact that the whole movement is so ugly. Not to be mean, although I guess it is mean, but to say like it has no appeal. It has no cultural appeal. There's nothing drawing you there except for them bullying you that you might lose your job or something if you don't support their politics, and that's gone now. Their influence is gone. We're allowed to make fun of them, and mocking is the worst thing that you can do to a movie. I mean, it's over for you.
Yeah. So, Emma, what are you doing now? What are you up to now? Tell me about life. You recently had a peaceful departure from us at Breitbart full time. Though I think we'll be seeing you pop up from time to time. First, on the personal level, you're a new mom. How's that going?
Thank you. It's going great. Thank God. My daughter is super chill. She's already learning so well. She doesn't bother us much. She's really easy. She cries when she needs something. I was telling you this, that she cries when she needs something, and otherwise she's like happy and napping or chilling, looking around.
All we ask for are reasonable babies. Just tell your babies this. We just want you to be reasonable. You're free to cry. That's how you communicate.
Really is.
Just make it legit.
Well, that's it. And now when she cries, she knows, though, because when she cries now, I am like determined to figure out why she's crying as opposed to just assuming it's, that she's colicky and letting it go. So, no, she's very smart, very pragmatic, and I really appreciate it. But, no, she's great. And as to what I'm doing professionally, so actually, I had something that I wrote about this, and I didn't want to submit it to you because it sounded so self-absorbed. But maybe you might like it because you kind of like my self-absorbed writing sometimes. But I'll try it now, and I'll see how you respond to it.
I call it voice. You can call it self-absorbed. I call it when you're using the voice. But
that's right. And I become extremely uncomfortable when you ask me to write like that. But in any case, so through the laptop from hell experience, it took me like years to really process it. Obviously, it was kind of crazy. And you're thinking about it, and you have different iterations of how you think about it. But in any case,
it does seem to grow in retrospect. It feels like one of those things that actually feels more significant now. It feels like a historical event now, which at the time it was a big story, but now it feels like actual part of history.
Yeah, and there's so many layers to trying to process it. Like it was just, there was so much going on there, and one of the ways that, or one of the things that came to me while I was thinking about it was I found it really interesting because I grew up, and I'm sure you did too, being taught that the government is the main power center in this country, and the government is the most legitimate force in your life, and the government can show up at your door with guns and make you do stuff. And laws are enforced with guns, and you have to follow them. And what was really interesting about the laptop from hell experience that I kind of started to think about was that actually Twitter and Facebook were the ones that were approached by the government to exert power, not the other way around. Like, it wasn't activists at Twitter and Facebook who went to the NSA and CIA and said, how are you going to make sure that Orange Man doesn't get in? It was the other way, where the NSA and CIA and FBI were in constant contact, constantly pestering the big tech companies, constantly trying to get their people hired at these companies, and trying to co-opt the company for their ends. And that direction of influence really interested me. It was like, wait, like, so what that told me was like, yeah, it's true. Like, you know, the government has the guns, but the corporations have this soft influence over all of our lives.
And that was really the playbook that Hollywood used. And it's interesting.
That was my next sentence, was the left actually has known this for decades. Exactly. Be it through Hollywood and they have tons of these like insane organizations like the HRC, which like basically go and hijack these companies and hijack their policies and their marketing departments and their HR departments in order to further left-wing politics in the culture. And they realize that, yeah, companies can do this without anybody even noticing necessarily. But all of a sudden they're driving behavior and driving thinking.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
So this is going to be a focal point for what we're doing at Breitbart over the next several years, I think. I think the culture war has really shifted. I feel like that we've decimated Hollywood to some degree, and they're going to have to figure out their way forward, whether it's, you know, apolitical independent movies, is creating the blockbuster experience that's apolitical, whatever it's going to be. They got to come up with something new because whatever they're doing now is not working for them. The establishment media has never been at a weaker point. They're less popular than Congress, which is almost impossible. Yeah. And the universities are still powerful, too powerful, but they're waning in influence. I think bachelor's degrees are kind of mocked at this point, and you're seeing these upstart conservative either entities or even outright schools that are gaining power. So I'm feeling better about that. But there's new fronts. The one that I'm maybe most interested in at the moment is the lawfare front, which is a big problem. But you're really honing in your work or homing in on this DEI stuff, where these corporations, the wokeification of corporate America is a major threat in the culture war. It is changing things, the way our culture is exported around the world. It's a big lasting impact. So give us the sort of 30,000 foot and then give us some of the specifics that you're observing. Yeah, well, so I started to think about this concept of the left using corporations as a vehicle to push their politics, and that would be fine and I guess makes sense, except that especially in recent years, the American public is kind of pushing back on that very aggressively. And in fact, these companies are really shooting themselves in the face by doing this stuff. And so I became fascinated with that. Like, just as a journalist, it's like, how is it possible that these companies, which ostensibly exist to benefit their shareholders, are disregarding their own self-interest in order to pander to places like the Human Rights Campaign? So I started to kind of get in touch and talk to different big consultants, like really big consultants and really big companies, and people. You'd be surprised how open people are to just hanging out and talking to you if you just email them and you're like, hey, I'm a journalist off the record. I'm just curious about something. Can we have coffee? You know, people are totally open and want to talk. And what I realized was that there was actually a lot of texture to this. And not only was there a lot of texture, but there was a lot of people inside these companies who were realizing, like, wait, maybe this actually doesn't reflect the culture of the American people and what the American people actually like. Maybe I was just told that by consultants and nonprofits who make money off of me thinking that. And maybe this stuff is actually really going to hurt me. And maybe this stuff poses a lot of risk to me. And at the same time, obviously, you're having the momentum build around the Trump campaign. And it's kind of looking like the resistance doesn't really exist much anymore, except for on MSNBC from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And you realize that some companies are looking for a way to back away slowly. Obviously, not to go to the right per se, but to just get out of the politics industry when their job is really to, I don't know, sell iPhone cases or whatever. So it just seemed like, it's like, wait, this is actually probably a good opportunity to be, again, like, you know, the only conservative in the room to be able to say, like, wait, that's actually very offensive. That's actually very political. Wow.
You think that that's like you being kind or inclusive or something, but it's actually racist. Or whatever, you know, and that's basically what my job is now, is talking about certain, you know, messaging, talking about certain products, and really trying to help people figure out, how do I just back away from politics and get back to the basics of growing my business and appealing to all market segments. Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, after the Black Lives Matter Summer of Love riots, that I would make a point whenever I would make a big consumer purchase, I would always go on Twitter to see if they put up the black square. Do you remember that back in the day? And if they put up the black square, I wouldn't buy from them.
Yeah, I'd buy from someone else. And I was doing this. I don't think I ever mainstreamed it. I talked about it, but I would always do this. And one of the companies I stopped buying from because of the black square, they had announced earlier this year that they are now abandoning their DEI stuff. But I'll tell you what the company sells. They sell whiskey to presumably a lot of middle class white males. It's like, why were they posting the black square? Like, what was their thought there? How could they have thought that was a good corporate idea? And they've since changed their mind, which is good for you, but also, why did you get this wrong to begin with? This was so obvious.
I think that a lot of, obviously I can't speak about, I think every company is run by their own people, and some companies are run by really like crazy ideologues. But I think for a lot of companies, they're run by people who are just trying to appeal to a broad market. So they're told by consultants that everyone needs you to make a statement about Black Lives Matter. Who are those consultants? They're people who work on Park Avenue. So those consultants have a really weird frame of reference as to what the public is, and nothing else. Like, they have no other concept. I walked into a major consulting firm. I won't use their name because I just feel like it's kind of nasty to embarrass them like this for no reason, where I really think this was ignorance. But I walked into a major consulting firm while I was at Breitbart because I was curious about this whole topic, right? And I thought maybe I'll write about it or whatever. I just want to learn about it. And these people consult with every Fortune 500 company and also like global leaders. It's one of the serious ones. And they started like mansplaining to me about how conservatives hate women and gay rights and whatever. And they couldn't adapt their mental model to talking to me because they were expecting somebody with two teeth to walk in. And what they got instead was like a cosmopolitan lesbian. And they didn't know what to do with that. And they weren't really sure how to talk to me. And so they tried to start lecturing me about what conservatives are like and what conservatives believe, which was obviously completely off. And it was off by the fact that I existed and was sitting in their office. But they couldn't make sense of that. Not only could they not make sense of that, but they had never even heard of that. So just to say, these are the people who are consulting these companies and telling them that everyone expects you to put a black square in your profile on your Instagram or whatever. And these companies are now coming to realize through, social media campaigns that are getting them knocked off whatever board they're in, or getting their CEO fired, that actually maybe this isn't correct. Maybe those consultants were wrong. And now how do we get out of this? Because for the most part, these CEOs and these corporate boards do not believe in this stuff. They're making money. And
all of this peaked when they called us Nazis for having a rally at Madison Square Garden. And because some guy told a Puerto Rico joke, we now are comfortable with the price of eggs being what they are and not drilling for oil. So it's when they suggested we would fall for that and then we didn't. I'm hoping maybe we're officially out the other side. So you work for this company called Beck and Stone. Just explain what this is, and then I got to pick your brain on a news item before we run.
Okay. So Beck and Stone is a brand consultancy. They actually do a lot of work with nonprofits, especially conservative nonprofits, and they work with a lot of brands and names that you would know. Compact is one, the Claremont Institute, and I got to know the partner, Andrew Beck, my boss, through a mutual friend, and we had been talking about all of this stuff that I just said to you. I basically gave him the same speech. I think corporations are a big vector of influence of the culture, and I think that a lot of corporations are looking for ways to back out of leftism and cultural Marxism, and I think that they don't really know or have the resources or wherewithal to figure out how to do that in a classy way. And he was just kind of like, well, I agree with you. Do you want to come and try to build out a little corporate consultancy within Beck and Stone? And he had done some corporate consulting in the past as well. And he was like, yeah, like we could probably figure this out. I think that there's a big demand for this. He was feeling the same way. And that was kind of just how we connected. And that's it. It's like I've always felt like I have an ability to understand and connect. You know, I'm in New York and I'm from Montreal originally, as you said at the top.
Hey, you got to ride that. That's my move. I'm the Hollywood guy who's a right-wing radical. So.
Well, exactly. Well, no, but you know, it's true. It's like I feel like I have the ability to speak in the language of like city, you know, coastal types, and also understand and connect with and agree with the people who are more in the middle of the country, and bridge that gap between the two worlds. And I think that that's a very productive way to spend your time and a productive thing for the country. So that was just kind of what led to the decision, really.
It's very cool. The best decision I ever made was not blowing it with Mrs. Dr. Marlow when she let me take her on a date. But the second best decision was going to UC Berkeley, retiring from baseball earlier than I thought I would, and really understanding the institutional left and living amongst them and understanding them so that I could use it to ultimately defeat them, or at least we're doing pretty good. I got to take advantage of you, Emma, because you were a longtime Montreal resident, and Montreal is... They've seen better days. They got Justin Trudeau. He's partying, watching Taylor Swift. Can we please move past this Taylor Swift moment? We're better than this, people. We can do better than Taylor Swift. And in the meantime, let me give you a taste of what's going on. I'm going to play some footage. I'm going to live react to that. I have not seen what Misty pulled for us, so let's see what we got. Oh, that looks nice. You guys, if you're not watching on YouTube or Rumble, you're missing this, but this is exactly what it looked like during the BLM 2020 stuff, pretty much identical. Smashing auditoriums, smashing storefronts, everyone's wearing the balaclavas, masks, can't identify anyone. A lot of, looks like Palestinian flags. Not a lot of maple leafs there. One more clip here. This is a side-by-side of Trudeau dancing at the concert as smoke-filled protests. Well, those are smoke bombs. That's some planning ahead there. That was RT footage, so hopefully we get canceled for that. That's good.
Actually got banned.
Hey, get good attention. I'll get a bunch of new subscribers if we do that. Let's get canceled. So Emma, tell me what's going on and your perspective as someone from Montreal. This is not what we've known from our nice Canadian neighbors to the north.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, those people aren't Canadians, I don't think, for the most part. The Trudeau government has done this funny little thing that they have, let me rewind to try to express how insane the footage you just saw was, because Montreal is not like an American city that inculcates these radicals and, on campus or whatever. And you see, like, for instance, we saw this in New York, we saw it in Chicago, we saw it at UCLA. And we could talk about the different sources of that, but Montreal, let me just say the culture isn't the same in Montreal, and it never was. It's a very passive culture in Canada. It's a very relaxed culture. You don't have a lot of political activism. The only real, violent political activism, at least, that you had was in Quebec with the separatists, and that was probably 50 years ago. And since then, you never ever saw that. You never saw that. Obviously, they were always liberal, but especially in Quebec, where Montreal is, it's like, if you think of Quebec like a state and then Montreal is a city within the state, we call it a province. That is not normal. That is absolutely not normal. That is a new thing. And that's why I assumed, again, I don't know the identities of every single person that was at that protest, but what I do know is that under Justin Trudeau's leadership, if you can believe this stat, the Canadian population has grown by 300% in immigration in the time that Justin Trudeau has been in power. Where have they been from? It's been from the Middle East, in large part from the Middle East and from Africa. And if you go to Montreal now, the demographics do not look at all how it did when I was growing up. And I don't say that with regard to the race of the people, because actually Montreal is a very multicultural place. The way that they're able to get away with, and always have been able to get away with, having many different cultures living in one city in harmony with a lot of social cohesion and high trust, has been because there has been a tremendous effort to enforce cultural rules, basically. Canada doesn't have freedom of speech. So Quebec has a national language.
That's a good segue, because I got to ask about Ezra Levant, who runs an outfit called the Rebel News.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
we've had a lot of contact with Ezra over the years. He's been supportive of us at Breitbart and vice versa. He's being labeled a far-right activist. He was just filming the anti-Israel, pro-Hamas riots taking place in a Jewish neighborhood. He says he was on a public sidewalk when he was getting the footage, and he got arrested. It's to your point. You say that you don't have free speech. This is not. You're not being snarky. You literally don't have free speech. Can you explain this arrest and what you think? Could there be any lessons learned here?
Well, so it's funny because I was just about to say something else, and I'll just finish that thought, and then I'll get to Ezra Levant. But basically, Canada doesn't have freedom of speech, so because of that, they can require or compel a certain way of speaking. And in Quebec's case, it was always French. So like in America, in America, you can speak any language you want because it's freedom of speech. So if you move here and you decide you never ever want to learn English, you're allowed to speak Spanish or Hebrew or French or whatever you want for your entire time, for your entire life. In Quebec, that's not the case. You have 6 months to learn French. And if you don't learn French, you will not be served in any other language but French. So you'll basically be forced to move away. You won't be able to survive. So that was how they always implemented kind of like a cultural cohesion inside of Quebec. But now, and Canada writ large, but now because immigration has gone so off the rails under Trudeau, it's impossible to assimilate that number of people. And what you have now is people bringing into Canada their tribal feuds and their regional feuds and their ethnic feuds, and that was what you were watching. What you were watching was a Palestine, a Gaza riot or rally or whatever. And as to and then obviously there's another side to the coin of not having freedom of speech, which is if you're a journalist and you're just filming, you don't have the right to do that. You don't have the right to do that. And the police can just say, stop because I said so. We saw a great example of this during the summer with the truckers, where Canada was, or maybe it was obviously not like the summer that just passed, it was the summer before, but the truckers, remember when they all congregated in Ottawa to demand COVID restrictions be lifted and their bank accounts were seized? That's not technically illegal in Canada. There's really weird... Speech freedom was always kind of something that we all agreed to, like a social contract, but it was never actually codified. But we all agreed, we talk freely in Canada because we're a civilized country. But the second a politician wants to say, actually, I'm not feeling civilized today, I'm going to take your bank account away, he does have the right to do that. And that's what happened to Ezra Levant. His camera was taken away, and that happens to him constantly. He constantly has reporters getting arrested, getting their stuff seized. Because, listen, it's not America, and Americans really take that for granted. I mean, that's why I wanted to move here. It's just a better country.
So here's the spicy question I've got. Should we liberate Canada? Should America come up there? I don't know what it would look like yet. Should we take it over? Should we free them and let them vote for what they want? Or is this just
you saw that video? Do we want that problem?
I have no idea. I mean,
listen, I think the silver lining to all of this is that people who were typically very polite Canadians are now coming to the realization that actually no, maybe a little bit of impoliteness is in order. And we have Canada has an opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, who you love. I don't know if you remember him, but you love him. You've mentioned loving him with the Apple clip.
Yeah, the Apple thing. Yeah, no. Whenever I'm doing a doom scroll, if he shows up in my reels when I'm doing a doom scroll, I'm stuck. I'm just watching him for the next 5 minutes.
So that's it. So he's surging, and he called this out. Listen, a lot of politicians who would typically be more polite in opposition to Trudeau or on Trudeau's side have come out and basically said, what is going on in Montreal? What is going on in Canada? We have completely lost control of the plot, and we've completely lost the plot. We need to, and Trudeau said that. I mean, Trudeau came out himself, and this is just the other day, and you actually mentioned it tacitly on the podcast, where he came out and was like, actually, we have to reduce immigration by probably 25% a year for at least 3 years to at least stabilize the population. Because, like I said, we have completely lost control. They went from we are a melting pot, we have no distinct culture, to actually there are terrorists throwing Molotov cocktails into the windows at Concordia University. So maybe we better figure out a way to define a culture, at least as not that.
It is very clear that you pay attention to the show, because I did mention it and it was passive and it did deserve more time, but I did not dwell on it. So I'm glad you brought that back up, because yes, even he's got to see the writing on the wall to some degree, but not enough to resist those juicy Taylor Swift tickets. You got to be able to go to Taylor Swift even if the riots are taking place.
Almost in his defense, but this is so backhanded. These riots have been going on every single weekend since October 7th.
Wow.
There is apparently a huge and vocal pro-Palestinian constituency, which is new in Montreal. So why would he assume that this week's one was going to devolve into this crazy, burn it all down riot, when they've been doing them every single weekend for over a year? I've run into it before, and you literally have to take off your Jewish star jewelry because you're going to get wrecked. It's very scary, and it doesn't resemble at all the city that I grew up in. It's actually very sad. I've watched my home be destroyed.
Emma Jo, we're going to have to call on you again as our unofficial and maybe one day official Canadian correspondent and cultural correspondent. We'll just give you a bunch of different fun titles, and that'll be a thing we do. But that was very generous of you to report on that for us and spend all this time with us. If people want to support you or check out what you're up to, where should they go?
I'm still on Twitter, and I'll send you my narcissistic column. Maybe you'll publish it.
Yeah, I probably will. I'll certainly read it and enjoy it, and probably publish it. No, good. I appreciate it, and anything I can do to help out, then you know where to find me. But this was so enlightening, and I did not mean to keep you a full hour, but I definitely am glad I did, because that was. I feel like we got another 2 hours in us if we wanted to go. But we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you very much to our producer Misty, the great Emma Jo Morris, all of you telling 10,000 friends and family members about the new show, subscribing wherever you get your podcast, leaving 5-star reviews. All of that helps engagement and helps things hit the algorithm, etc. It's all a nasty little game, but we have to play it and play it well, and we will win. We will win. We are in a season of winning here on the Alex Marlow Show. Happy Thanksgiving to Emma. We invite you to celebrate, even if you're partially Canadian. You're adopted American now, so you've got to. It's a great holiday.
I'm assimilated. I will be celebrating Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's so good. I'm not cooking a turkey this year, and I pitched my wife while I was drifting off to sleep yesterday that maybe I'll just cook one. I'll just cook one for fun. It feels like I'm supposed to. As an American.
Well, I know you got a good roast recipe, so
yeah, well, I got the pot roast going. I mean, it was I was getting figuratively roasted by the audience for my crock pot skills. A lot of scolding going on at aloha@alexmarlow.com.
To be honest, not to pile on, but I was trying to think about how it was possible that you made a dry piece of meat in a crock pot.
Yeah.
I couldn't visualize even how you did that.
Yeah, I don't know how I did it. I thought the meat would break down the way it does when I cook a brisket or when I cook a pulled pork. I thought eventually all those little fibers would break down and it would sort of fall apart, and it just did not. It just came out like a burnt freaking steak, just like the worst version of an Applebee's steak you've ever had in your life. And it's just how did I do this? And the flavors are unbelievable. It's some red wine, some onions, and some. She got the shallots in there and got the beef stock, and it was all great. And then it just tasted like dog meat. I don't, and not meat you'd feed your dog, like you're eating a dog. That was the consistency.
Okay, this isn't Springfield, Ohio, Alex.
Yeah. Hey, they're the big winners of the election. They'd say all those dogs and cats in Springfield. They're the real winners here. All right. Yeah. We were in silly hour, which is probably good, but we should stop here. Emma Jo, you'll be back soon, I hope. Thanks again to everyone. We'll talk to you tomorrow.